Oh, howdy all, grab yourselves a beer, it is time for some Path of Exile discussion. Now, I had a popular video a while ago where I outlined tips and strategies for getting a 6-link early in a league. And to boil it all down, it used to be that you could self-farm a number of divination cards. However, with the changes to the Atlas of Worlds that are taking place with Conquerors of the Atlas, I feel that a number of the ones that used to be quite target farmable may no longer be as good as they used to be. So what I want to do is go through the various options for picking up a 6-link for yourself. Now firstly, one of the big sources of 6-links in the new league is going to be corrupt 6-links dropping from Vaal side areas in maps. Vaal side areas in maps are probably going to feel worth doing, and when you complete a Vaal side area, you will receive a special chest in which everything is corrupted. Amongst other things, this will usually drop a sacrifice fragment and or a Vaal skill gem. But additional to that, it will also drop a whole bunch of just random loot, which is corrupted. One of the outcomes when an item that can have 6 sockets gets corrupted is that it can be re-rolled into a random rare item, and this random rare item will have any number of sockets that the item could have from 1 to 6, and any number of links from 1 to 6 that the item could have. However, we're normally sockets biased towards not getting many sockets and getting unlinked ones. These ones from the Vaal side areas are different, and for that matter, any 6-link that is caused by what we term as bricking a rare item, so re-rolling it as a corrupted rare. These will have a much more favourable bias towards being 6-linked. As a result, there is a reasonable chance, it's not good, but there is a non-zero chance, and it's actually quite a bit higher than 0, that when you open one of these Vaal vessels, you'll receive a 5-link or a 6-link chest. The downside to this is that it will have no quality, it will have stats that you can't modify, you can't use a benchcraft on it, but if you can use the colours on it, it is miles better than a Tabula Rasa. So that's going to be one source of 6-links. In a trade league, this is actually really impactful, because whilst a player that picks up, say, a 3 blue, 2 red, 1 green that has no use for those colours, can then put it up for trade, and someone else that's playing those colours will then buy it because it's a huge upgrade for them. And likewise, someone else might pick up the 3 green, 1 red, 2 blue that is perfect for that character. And so you can have this sort of percolation of them throughout the economy. In solo self-found, that's not the case. And I will point out that in solo self-found, I don't think that these corrupted 6-links are going to be a particularly big deal for most players. There'll be a bonus when they come up if they happen to be the right colours, but it's very unlikely that they will be. So, here's a list of divination cards that grant 6-link items, and where they can be farmed. This is found on the Path of Exile wiki. And I want to point out the ones that I used to advocate farming that I no longer do. So, Bowyer's Dream is worth considering farming, especially if you're playing a build like I am that wants to use a Harbinger Bow. It only drops from the Lord of the Ashen Arrow, and it's now still possible, I believe, to target farm the Ashenwood map, although I can't say for certain. We're going to have to figure out through trial and error some of the new mechanics of the Atlas of Worlds, but if the mechanics work reasonably similar to how we expect them to, then what your strategy is going to be is you'll run this pier map here, because this will be the first map that you'll get access to in the Atlas, so you'll make sure that your first map that you run is a pier. And you keep running piers until you get a Haunted Mansion. Once you get a Haunted Mansion, you keep running Haunted Mansions until you get an Ashenwood. At this point, you stop running anything that is not an Ashenwood. You just keep grinding Ashenwoods, and the only tier 3 map that can drop for you is Ashenwood itself, or anything that happens to be adjacent to it that is also tier 3. Hopefully there's none of those. However, I could be reading this wrong. It's entirely possible that Ashenwood is not a tier 3. It's entirely possible that some of these maps might disappear when the Atlas is socketed differently, and as a result, you may not be able to rely upon getting access to the Ashenwood map at all. So that's something we're going to have to discover through trial and error. And I'll say the same thing now for Channel Map as well. Channel Map was a favourite for Humility. I think it will probably still be possible to rush to Channel first, and I also think there's a very good possibility that the tiers could be 1, 2, 3, 4. If that's the case, then you'll be able to farm channel maps as much as you want. And if you do run out of channel maps, you can run an Atsuri, if you're capable of beating Atsuri, that is. you'll be able to run Atzuri and then replenish all of your tier 4 maps in there. Because every monster in the Apex of Sacrifice, which is a tier 3 zone, every monster in there is magic with the exception of the bosses, and magic monsters in there drop tier 4 maps, so one higher than the zone. And the only map that it can drop, because Atzuri's zone respects your Atlas configuration, the only map it can drop will be channels. However, I'm not absolutely confident that those approaches will work. The backup approach for farming a Tabula Rasa, you can go back to Blood Aqueducts. I don't like doing this, but some people do prefer it. They do find that it works better for them than it does for me. You can farm this item in Act 9 in the Blood Aqueducts, or even in Act 4 in the Aqueducts if you wish. I'll leave that choice up to you. I'm going to personally be playing in a trade league, so my approach is going to be instead to find other juicy items and trade them for other people's humilities if I want to use a Tabula Rasa. But, of course, if you're in solo self-found, that's not an option, and if you need a 6-link, a humility will probably be your best bet for it. The other divination card that grants a Tabula is Vanity. Vanity drops in from Vaal vessels at the end of Vaal side areas, and in my experience seems to have about a 10% drop rate, so that's a lot of Vanity farming. You're going to need to run 90 Vaal side areas on average, assuming I'm correct. And if you've watched my video on statistical anomalies within Path of Exile, you'd know that I'm not very confident about that 10% estimate. It could be 5%, in which case, because that fits well within my 95% confidence zone interval for that probability of getting a Vanity. And if it is 5%, then it's just untenable to farm one of those. It's just too much grinding. So, of the Tabula Rasa divination cards, Humility is the one that I think is more plausible. You can either set up your Atlas to prioritize channels, or you can go back into the Axe. Emperor of Purity, I advise against farming this divination card now. It had its niche in the past when it could be chanced into Vol's Devotion. Vol's Devotion has been changed since, and the builds that used to care about it generally don't, and also they're really off meta. This is just not a very useful divination card anymore, unfortunately. Imperial Legacy drops everywhere. This drops a 6-link Imperial bow with a high item level, as high as possible item level, and it drops from both some of the Act 9 desert zones and also from the maps that are based on them. The Foothills is the most farmable of these desert zones. The Foothills is actually a really fast farm, and if you're feeling that you're a bit low on XP, it's something that you can do while you're in Act 9. So keep that one in mind. It's a very real option, but you will complete a set of Humility for Tabula Rasa quicker than you will complete a set of Imperial Legacy, and you can also farm Humilities in Act 9 as well, if that's the way you want to go. Rebirth, just don't farm this. Just don't farm Onigoroshi at all. Onigoroshi is a ridiculous time sink to get by any of the means that exist in the game. If you're in a trade league and you want one, buy it. If you're in solo self-found, go without, because as much as it's a cool sword, it's just, unless you hate fun, unless you're really masochistic, you don't want to go through the ordeal of getting that. The Celestial Justicar is a divination card that has a lower drop rate and drops in the Cursed Crypt map. I'm no longer going to recommend target farming this at all. If you get these divination cards while you are mapping, and you're in a trade league, then sell them to other players, or potentially purchase the rest of the set yourself and turn it in on a level 80 character, and you'll get yourself a nice astral plate. But I just think that with the new changes to the Atlas of Worlds, there's no real way to target farm this card anymore. You can't set up your Atlas so that Cursed Crypt is the only map you're running, and so consequentially, this is, by the time that you're able to complete a set of this card, you will have outgrown it. You will have come across something better than a 6-link astral plate. I'm going to say the same thing about the Chains that Bind. This drops in 4 different maps. It used to be something that you could target farm. At this point, I'm going to say don't bother with it. Likewise for Dapper Prodigy, again, I'm going to say this is a trade league oriented trade league oriented divination card. The Dark Mage is an interesting card. With an item level of 55, it's quite limited in what it can turn into, but it certainly does have its narrow niches. If you're playing a build that actively wants a 6-link staff with a low item level for various crafting shenanigans, then in that case, you know the 2 maps to focus on. From memory, this is not that rare a card. and it may actually still be plausible to complete a set of these by raising one section of your atlas above the rest. So while you're in mostly white maps, raise one section of the atlas with one watchstone into low yellow maps, and then focus on running Overgrown Rune or Overgrown Shrine maps within that. Otherwise, though, I don't think that this is going to be a great call. The Ethereal has never been a target farmable divination card. It's just basically bonus loot if you get it while you're running the Apex of Sacrifice. It is quite a rare divination card to drop, and whilst a 6-link Val Regalia is a great prize when you get it, I strongly suggest you just treat each one of these cards that drops as just being a currency drop. Sell it to other players early on day one. The Porcupine is something that was very popular back in the days when Quillrain was a great bow. Quillrain got buffed in this patch, but I still don't think it's very good, and as a result I'm just going to advise against farming this divination card. If you're wondering what this has got to do with Quillrain, the reason that this card exists was to be able to use Chance Orbs and Scouring Orbs on it in order to generate a 6-linked Quillrain. The Sacrifice is a divination card that is too rare to target farm at all. It drops in the Temple of Atzoatl, which would be target farmable because you could just prioritize doing Elva missions over everything else. However, the drawback here is that, in my experience, it seems to drop only from the Architects of the Temple, and I believe it drops approximately 1% of the time that you kill one of them. Again, there's a huge margin of error on that 1% estimate. Maybe it's as high as 3 or 4%, maybe it's as low as 0.1%, but I've only ever had it drop twice for me, and I've never heard of anyone completing a set of this in solo self-found. I'm sure it's been done, just not by me. And lastly, the Warlord from the Arsenal map is another divination card set that I feel is not particularly possible to complete in solo self-found. So, having said all of this, it's clear that the pool of divination card sets that are plausible to self-compile in solo self-found has shrunk with the changes that are happening to the Atlas of Worlds in patch 3.9. I think that the three of them that are most plausible to compile yourself are Bowyer's Dream, Humility, and Imperial Legacy, should you want any of those. And in each of these cases, your best bet is going to be to rush straight to the map that they drop from and try to just run that map only. Or in the case of Imperial Legacy, to jump back into Act 9 and to run the foothills, because the foothills is a very compact zone with a lot of enemies in it. Anyways, if you've got any comments or questions, definitely fire away. Of course, remember that you can always trade with other players, and the trade interface is likely to go down on day one. It has done that plenty of times in the past, but the way that you would search for a 6-link is to go to the Path of Exile website, go into trade, click search items, then wait. You'll be waiting longer than I am here because it'll be during the league. Select the correct league, so I'm just choosing standard because obviously standard's all that's available at the moment. I'm recording this before the Metamorph League goes live, but you'll be choosing either Metamorph Solo Self-Found, Hardcore Metamorph, or Hardcore Solo. Well, actually, can't search in Solo Self-Found, of course. You'll either be choosing Metamorph or Hardcore Metamorph if you're playing in the Temp League. Alternatively, if you're in Standard, you can always do that now. So, go down to Socket Filters and select the types of links that you want the item to have. So if you're looking for an item that has at least 2 red, at least 1 green, and at least 3 blue, all linked, and you want it to be a body armor piece, then you can just go body armor and hit a search. And here we go. Here's a whole bunch of results that have come up. Most of these will be corrupted, and again, these will have dropped from either the Val vessels I was talking about, or alternately from a few other places in the game that drop corrupt items like the Eternal Labyrinth. And you'll see here, these have got bad stats locked into them, but that's fine. What you're wanting is a 6-link, you don't need it to be amazing. Some of these this one would have been sourced from a divination card set, you can tell by the fact that it's item level 100. And if we keep looking down here, you'll see there's plenty more options to choose from. The more that you're willing to pay, the more powerful the explicit mods that are already on the item will be able to become. Anyway, so comments or questions, definitely fire away below. Otherwise, hope you have a good start to the Metamorph League, and good luck finding a 6-link on your own.